Thanks, everybody. And again, just to sort of set the stage for this, I've been doing product management since the late 1980s, so probably since before a lot of you were born. It's not a new thing. 15 interim head of product jobs at B2B SaaS enterprise companies. That was enough for me to figure out that was no fun and I should stop. And these days, I'm mostly a one-on-one coach for chief product officers at B2B SaaS companies. And this discussion really comes out of the conversations that we have almost every week. And it's a challenge of people, not spreadsheets. And how do we communicate with the folks who make real decisions? So we're going to call this practicing the language of money. We're good. And we don't need to hear about me. Anybody who wants a copy of my book, drop me an email later. I'm happy to send the bits, but not important. I want to tell a little brief story, though, and I can't see everybody, but we'll ask for a show of hands. If you've ever been at a social event or a company thing or a cocktail party or a place where there's someone there who's really insistent on trapping you in a corner and spending 25 or 30 minutes of your life telling you all about something that you're completely not interested in. So it's the golf fan who wants to take 25 minutes to tell you about American golf courses versus Scottish golf courses, and who gets to wear the green jacket, and you don't care for it because you're not a golf fan. It's the Dungeons and Dragons person who's going to really explain in great detail about orcs versus elves and who does what, right? I'm now living in Lisbon, and it's all about, is it Benfica or Sporting? Who's the football team that we support? What color we wear, right? On anybody been the recipient, been on the far side of this conversation? Raise your hand. Where someone's really going to spend a lot of your life telling you about something that you have zero interest in, right? That's this guy. He's got a beer. He's going to trap you in the corner. Why are we starting here? We're starting here because my observation, and it took me too long to get there, but after decades of working with executives on the go-to-market side of our companies, the sales and marketing and finance and operations execs, it turns out, we may not know this, they are completely uninterested in all the details of how we build products and Scrum versus Kanban versus SAFe and how long our sprints are and backlog management. There's a whole range of things that we love and that our developers really care about that our go-to-market leaders and stakeholders are deeply uninterested in. Yet, because we love this so much, we spend a lot of our time trying to educate them about things that they would rather not know about. Right? Anybody been there? All right, so let's put up a couple of phrases. So first takeaway, you don't want to be that person who's going to insist on educating a bunch of folks in your company about something that they really, really don't want to spend their time on. It frustrates them, it frustrates you, and it doesn't accomplish that much, right? So I have a few phrases here for things that we say all the time, and they make perfect sense, and they're really useful when we use them within our maker teams. Development, design, DevOps, test engineering. When we're looking inward to the teams that build stuff, these are things we say that make perfect sense and we want to explore. Anybody ever said this? Okay. Now, I know that every one of you as a product manager has people coming to you almost every day with a really, really, really good idea, which may or may not be a really good idea, that they would like you to insert into the roadmap right away because it's urgent for them. And by the way, it's probably pretty small. I bet they tell you it's less than 10 lines of code, and your developers can do it in under a half hour. And we're agile, so can't we just fit it in, right? And we come back with something that sounds like this, right? There's no slack in the engineering plan, the roadmap, we're all busy. We're at 110%. Thank you very much for your input, right? Anybody ever said this, right? What is it that our go-to-market side and stakeholder side friends hear when we say these words? And somebody can just shout it out for me. Anybody? Yeah, what they hear is, we're not really very interested in what they have to say, and it's not important, and we're moving on, and they're not getting the thing they want, right? Okay, how about another phrase? Anybody ever said this? Yes, thank you very much for giving me that Post-it note with the 7-word description of what the customer said they wanted third hand as passed from sales to support to somebody else to us. It didn't make much sense, and we're going to have to go through this whole motion in order to figure out what you meant and what the customer wants, right? Turns out to be 100% true. But if I were on the sales team of an enterprise company and my big customer asked me for something, and this is the response I got back from product management, anybody know what I heard? What's the receiving end of this conversation? Nobody? Okay. You're just not that smart. If you would have asked all of the right questions, we could proceed from here. But I have to do your job for you. So please get out of the way so I can do my job, right? Inward looking, it makes perfect sense. It's not that attractive a discussion to have with our go-to-market friends. One more, right? Who's at a company that has a system somewhere or a process somewhere where people who have good ideas for features can fill out a form and automatically submit that to product management to be reviewed? Anybody raise your hands? I bet it's a bunch of you, right? Keep your hand up in the air if somebody actually looks at the majority of those and comes back with a thoughtful decision within a week or two. Right? It's not what happens, right? We've created these systems which folks in our company can spend a lot of energy filling with ideas, but the odds of any of those actually ending up going through the process and getting into our roadmaps are nearly zero, right? And everybody knows it. And so it's really viewed as a side route to avoid the question of engaging, right? And the reason I say these is because, take away in a second, these are all true, but when we frame them this way with our go-to-market execs and our business side stakeholders, they sound like something else, right? When we talk about generic processes, it sounds like excuses to the rest of the company, right? Everything that we just talked about sounds like you can't have what you want and need because we have this very complicated process which is going to go through all these steps and ultimately not give you what you need, right? Or we can shorten it and simply tell you you're not going to have it, right? By the way, anyone who uses the phrase product operating model with anyone on the business side of your company, at best it's a waste of time, at worst it's just a chance to get them infuriated because what they hear is, we're smarter than you folks and we have a process that doesn't give you what you want, right? So anyway, there we are. As product folks, we're trained to really think about what our end users want and what they need and how they express themselves and benefits to them. I'm going to apply some of the same tools here to our go-to-market execs and our internal stakeholders. And we'll ask the question of, what is it actually that our go-to-market execs care about? This isn't a hard question, won't take a lot of thought. Anybody know? Yeah, results is like one of those mediocre words. What's the real answer? Revenue would be good, or money even, that's a simpler word, right? So if we ask the question of what our go-to-market execs care about and what they're paid for and what they're bonused on and what the board of directors rips them up and down every day on are a few things. One is this, right? Short-term revenue. Everybody in your company, except maybe the folks like us who build product, are worried about current quarter revenue and what the stock market's going to do and how the shareholders are going to react if we don't hit the number that we promised for this quarter, right? And likewise, if we made a commitment to a customer to do something, and remember, I'm in the enterprise space, so this is usually a small number of big customers that we made promises to, even though we didn't know what those promises were supposed to contain, right? If we made a promise to deliver something on December 10th, then we better damn deliver something on December 10th, or people lose faith and the phones start to ring, right? What else do they care about? Again, in my space, in the enterprise space, there's usually 3 or 4 or 6 deals which represent a really big part of the revenue for this quarter, right? And your company will set up the dividing line, but let's say there's 6 deals this quarter that are bigger than 3 million euros a year or 300,000 euros a year or whatever your dividing line is. And what's important about those deals is not just that the sales team knows that they're the most important deals of the quarter, and your VP of sales knows they're the most important deal of the quarter, but your CEO knows them by name and checks every week to see how they're doing. And every member of your board of directors or investors calls your CEO, probably no more than once a week each, to ask how those very specific by name deals are going. Because if we don't close those deals, we miss the revenue and we may have to lay people off. So there's tremendous pressure on the revenue side of the house to bring in whatever the whales are for this quarter that are going to make the number. A lot of pressure. And again, for those in the enterprise space, there's almost always a very late arriving requirement or demand or feature that comes in from the prospect team, 6 to 12 hours before they're supposed to sign the contract, which we've never heard of. The sales team needs to say yes to for whatever reason. And actually, take a side note for a minute. The definition of a millisecond, anybody know? It's the time between when we on the product management side tell an enterprise sales team they can't have the feature they need to close the deal this week, and when they escalate to our CEO, right? That's a millisecond, right? It happens in all of these companies. It's not just yours. It's a pattern we see, right? One more thing, let's add the what don't they care about. I can tell you, after a lot of analysis and research here, that for the most part, your sales and marketing and operations and finance teams are not really interested in how we get stuff built or how we do our jobs. Unfortunately, because we love it and we would really like them to deeply appreciate it. Not important, not on their comp plan, not how they get paid, not what they spend their time on, which I think explains a lot of why we wanted them to remember the roadmap and we wanted them to understand our logic and we wanted them to go through the spreadsheets, but they just want to get on to when does it arrive and when can I start selling it, right? And so another way to say that, I don't know if you guys know this, right? Don't bring a backlog to a gunfight. If you're sitting in the executive suite, if you're the chief product officer, or you're trying to feed information to whoever is representing us on engineering and product in the executive suite, it's not a spreadsheet exercise where we walk them through 7 columns times 600 rows and we do the math and we explain the weightings and the Monte Carlo simulations. It's short discussions about money. So we have to find another way to talk about what we do, not change what we do, but express what we do in a way that our executive teams can hear. In fact, an assertion I make with a lot of my coachees is that no sentence that comes out of our mouth can be heard by any go-to-market executive unless it starts with a currency symbol, right? There's this selective deafness thing where they simply don't perceive or listen to what we say unless there's money attached, unfortunately. So we have to be able to take the work we're doing and we have to be able to bundle it up in a way that gets heard and is appreciated and is part of the way executives make trade-offs. All right? So let's introduce a different concept. You've heard it already all morning. I call them money stories. Okay? Notice these are not user stories. We're not going to talk about how customers are going to love it. We're not going to talk about how the architecture is going to change. We're not going to have details of code lines and code names and where we're going to check it and how we're going to test it. They're going to be very, 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 very simple stories that are about the money that comes with the work that we do. Right? And I don't know if anybody's ever worked in sales. I'll make the sales joke, but they're simple because the folks on our executive team, particularly on the sales side, aren't physicists and are very distracted by other things. And if they're not simple, they're not going to land. Okay, so the rules are, it's why they and we care about the work, not what the work is, right? SWAGs, anybody know the acronym? Scientific, wild, ask, guess. They're made up numbers, they're estimates, they're not perfect. They don't go out to 6 decimal places. We're going to have some SWAGs for what something's worth, right? They're not financial projections. We can't promise them next year for revenue, but they're really going to be useful. And then no more than 3 numbers. Only activity we're going to do is multiply. 2 of the numbers we're going to know, and 1 of the numbers we're going to make up. Okay? Actually, we're going to use some other words because it's going to sound much more scientific. I won't say make up. I'll say guesstimate, right? All right, so let's do a few because it turns out philosophy is not useful here. Let's actually look at a few. We're going to go through a few. They're all the same, but we'll do the examples, okay? Let's tell the upsell story. And I'm hoping almost everyone in the room here has told this story a bunch of times. I'll ask for a show of hands in a minute. But you've got a product that you're selling, and let's imagine it's in one of these classic tiered pricing structures: good, better, best, bronze, silver, gold, small business, medium business, enterprise, whatever. They're in 3 levels for a lot of good reasons, right? And we have this idea, we have this belief that if we added this really very cool special feature to the middle tier, we would get a lot of folks in the bottom tier to pay us extra money to get into the middle tier to get that feature, because it's very cool. Anybody ever told this story? Okay, I'm hoping a lot of us have, right? Now, notice that it's a sentence that our executives can't hear because it's missing something. It's missing the currency symbol, it's missing the money. And so we're going to tell this story, and they're going to nod very nicely and pretend to be paying attention, but they're really reading their email on their phones right now, right? Okay, so let's add the maths to here, right? So this is the generic thing. If we're talking about moving our customers from the basic to the premium plan, I guess I don't care about the labels, we're going to do the following math. How many basic customers do we have? What's the price increment from basic to premium? And what's our wild guess, because it's going to be a guess, for a range of how many of those, what fraction of those basic customers might show up and actually give us more money to get this really cool feature? And notice I didn't spend any time talking about what that feature was, because this audience doesn't care, right? What we're talking about is the result, the output, the revenue, the business impact of building this really cool feature and putting a price barrier in, right? So give you an example here, right? We have 2,000 customers in our basic plan, right? It's 60 euros a year, 6 euros a year to upsell, whatever it is. We guess based on some historical data and magic and, you know, discussions and whatever, we're hoping, thinking that maybe something between 2 and 5% of those customers will come across, right? Multiply, multiply, here we are. Notice the green now. I finally have the attention of my audience when I say, if we could add this cool feature and get folks to upgrade from basic to premium, I think maybe there's $250,000 to €500,000 euros in this next year for us, right? Oh, okay, tell me more. Now, it raises the question, is that a lot of money? Well, I don't know, right? But it's the right question, because if there's lots of other proposals on the table that are going to bring in millions, then maybe this isn't where we focus. But maybe we're in the early growth stage and we don't have a lot of customers and whatever. Is this a lot of money is now an important question, right? And we can ask the question and compare it to something else, because we didn't just talk about the tech. Everybody with me? All right, let's do a few more. And yes, hint, they're all the same. Okay, let's talk about churn or renewal, right? Every company has customers that don't renew, or corporate customers that don't re-sign, right? We all have some of these. And we've all told the story that said, if we could just fix this workflow for re-sign up, if we could just add this new feature, if we could just make the renewals easier, if we could just do this thing, more of our current customers would stay our customers next year, right? Now, sometimes we have this in the negative, we call it churn. Sometimes we have it in the positive, we call it renewals. It's the same math, right? Anybody ever told this story? I'm hoping, right? Okay, it's not a story until we add the numbers, so let's add the numbers. Well, how many churned accounts did we have last year? This might seem obvious, you can look it up. What's our typical average value per account? Somebody in finance can tell you this in 2 minutes. And what's our guess, our swag, our stab, our estimate for if we did this cool set of things, which our audience for the moment doesn't care about, we could retain more of those customers and they would renew and we would make them more money. By the way, there's a hint here. It's almost always easier and cheaper and faster to get people to stay on your service than to go find new folks and put them through the whole thing, right? So churn is usually one of the places we find lots and lots of leverage. Do the example, whatever consumer product, we got 230,000 non-renewals a year. I don't know if that's a lot, depends how big your base is. And we're collecting $400 a year for each of the folks who do renew. And for whatever reason, we think there's something between 1% and 4% that would stay out of this churn group if we did fill in really complicated technical thing that's going to appear on our roadmap, right? Multiply, multiply, gosh, that looks like something on the order of 1 to 4 million a year, right? There's our green. It's now a money story. Is that a lot of money? Well, depends on your situation. But we can now have a conversation about why my team should be able to focus on this instead of something else. And maybe we need a couple of extra resources or to push something out of the way, because 1 to 4 million might be enough to keep the attention of our executive team and make some good decisions. Right? Let's do a couple more. They're all the same. Transaction volume. Maybe you're in a business where you charge per unit. You're selling airline tickets. You are booking concerts or hotels, stock trades. There's lots of businesses where it's per transaction. Everything in e-commerce, you try to get them to put more items in the shopping cart or to come back more often. Transaction business. If we added this neat, cool feature, maybe it's free delivery above an order of 100 euros, right? Maybe it's faster turnaround. Maybe it's that the credit card transactions, as Celine just said, go through more likely, right? If we do this thing, which makes our users happy, if we remind them that we're in this business, they'll do more transactions, they'll consume more, and we'll make more money, okay? Not a sentence until we finish the numbers, right? So, how many of these did we do last year? That would be nice. And how much money do we make? What's our margin on each of these? And then what's our guess? What's our range? By the way, you see me putting up a range all the time instead of just a number, because it lets us remind our audience every time we talk about it that it's a range, that's a guess, that it's an estimate, that we don't have the full data, but we're trying to have a conversation about whether something's important and worth doing, right? So here's my numbers, right? We're in the stock trade business. We do 180 million trades a year. We make $3 a unit, whatever it is, right? We think there's a lift, 1.1%, 0.4%, that's your number. We multiply. Is $500,000 to $2 million a lot? Maybe not in this business. If we can't do this really cheaply, maybe it's not worth doing. We'll push it aside for something else, right? Last one, again, obvious support costs. We're getting a lot of calls from our users because X doesn't work or Y is complicated. If we did this design change, suddenly the calls would go down, right? Spend less time on the phones, more customer NPS, as Celine just said, right? There's no numbers, okay? So how many tickets do we get? And what does it cost us to service the tickets? And what's our guess for the improvement range? And we come up with a number, right? I had this in pounds because I don't actually care what the currency symbol is, right? There we go. The point of the exercise is not to be precise. The point of the exercise is that in 3 minutes or less, you and some of your stakeholders can quickly sketch out how big a thing this is. A quick sidebar here. I've done an awful lot of sort of surveying of backlogs at companies, and on average, the companies I work with have a backlog that's something between 20 times and 50 times their engineering throughput. Not 20%, 20 times. What that means as product managers is that we know absolutely that 19 out of 20 of those things will never, ever, ever get done, right? Anybody said the phrase, let me put that in the backlog for you and I'll let you know when we're gonna have it, okay? Which is another way of saying not in this lifetime and not until the polar caps come back after all the climate change is done, right? If we put it deep in the backlog, it's never going to see the light of day, right? And so we would like to eliminate 80% of or 90% of all these things because they don't make any sense in 3 minutes, rather than putting them in a backlog and having those stakeholders call us once every 2 weeks to see if it's popped up into the next sprint, right? So I call this count the digits, right? Notice this is not accurate, but I will claim that every one of you knows the difference between something that's going to deliver 4 digits of value next year, a few thousand in whatever currency you're in, or 6 digits next year, a few 100,000 in the currency you're in, or 8 digits next year, a few tens of millions in the currency you're in, and that you can do that on the back of an envelope in 3 minutes or less. And by the way, if it's a 4-digit idea, instead of telling the person who really wants this that you don't like them and they're wearing ugly clothing and you think they're dumb and that's why you're not going to give them the thing they want, right? We can have a more humane and unemotional discussion about how I'm having trouble penciling that out to make any sense because my team costs 20,000 euros a week. So spending a team week on that when it's only going to bring 30,000 euros into the company, you got to do better. You got to help me find a bigger number, right? So count the digits says vaguely, to an order of magnitude, how big is it? Because it turns out that there's some dividing line, and I don't know what it is at your company, but I know at most companies, there's some amount below which your executives leave the decisions to us because they're too small to care about, right? Your company might say, gosh, anything 5 million and up, we really want to engage on and talk about. Anything $1 million and down, we don't have the time for it, go figure it out, right? And that gives us a chance to do something I call shifting the conversation, right? So shift the conversation. Let's set the stage. And we had a question before about platforms. Let's imagine that you're the product manager or the director of product for a new platform we're building. And the point of the platform is it's going to enable a whole bunch of new products or new revenue next year, if we can just finish the platform, thank you very much, right? And not surprisingly, there are all these interrupts that keep coming from the executive team where some big customer calls up and says, if you could just add teleportation to our product by Friday, we'll renew for an extra 2 million, right? Anybody ever gotten that call? Actually, it doesn't come to us, it comes directly to your CEO, right? So there's this constant bombardment of incoming ideas, each of which has the potential of blowing up our roadmap, right? And I'll give you the non-financial answer, and it's not going to work so well. What do we do, us or our engineering partners in the meeting? We say something like this: well, gosh, we could sure do that for you, but we're going to have to pull the platform team off of the platform that we have in our roadmap, right? And it's going to cost us a whole quarter maybe for the platform that we're building. And anybody ever said these words or the equivalent, right? Notice it's not a money sentence, and so we're not presenting to our executives a decision that they can make or a reason to protect the roadmap. We've missed the mark, we're not communicating. So let's turn that around and say the same thing in a slightly different way, this way, and let's imagine we did our work when we started the platform and we figured out that, big range, we think this platform is going to enable something between 10 and 25 million next year, okay? Notice that's a really big spread, right? But it's okay, because now we get to say, I can certainly delay the platform by a quarter to do this crazy thing that this customer wants, whatever it is, right? But doing the quick math, because remember, everybody in the room is into quick math and simple numbers, I think that leaves something between 3 and 6 million on the floor for every single quarter we delay our platform. Because if you remember, and actually you don't remember, but I'll remind you, but if you remember, the reason we're doing the platform is because it's going to enable a bunch of things next year on the order of 10 to 25 million. And it's not that I don't like your idea or want to close this deal, but I think it's a bad financial choice for the company to leave 3 or 5 or 6 million on the floor to do a deal that's only worth $1 million and the margin is half of that, and we're going to have to spend a lot of other things, right? That's the language that our executives understand. By the way, the subtext, if you didn't hear it, is if we make bad financial decisions, you and as an executive team can't retire to Fiji or Malta as soon as you would like. We're going to have to put your retirement back an extra year, right? What do they care about? So the money story conversation lets us address the real issue, which is the cost of delay, which is a concept many of them don't really get, is real, and we put it in simple terms so that the folks who are going to force us to make a trade-off might just help us make the correct trade-off. Is this obvious? But none of us do it, okay? So this is the core of the coaching I do with a lot of my CPOs, because when we show up in the room and we talk about money stories with the folks who need to hear about money stories, we get more of the better decisions made, we get more stability to our roadmap, and we get to do the jobs that build the wonderful, great, terrific products that we heard about earlier that people are going to love and deliver value to the world, right? Okay, so that's enough of me talking. We're going to do a little exercise here, and we're going to do it in pairs. So I'm going to ask you to find someone to sit next to for a minute, and here's what we're going to do, okay? I want you to identify the biggest thing on your roadmap. Let's not get fussy about small things. What's the biggest thing on your roadmap? that's going to earn money for your company or dramatically save money for your company. You should know what it is, right? And I want you to tell a really, really simple money story to the other person. And hint, skip all the tech, because the tech doesn't matter for this moment, right? And it's going to look something like this. There's a base number, there's a price or a thing, and we're going to take a guess for how much, right? So we'll take, do we have 5 minutes? We have 8 minutes. How's that? We'll take some time to do this. Try it one way, try it the other way. I'm going to put up the template in a moment. And the idea is that you are able to tell the money story about why the biggest thing on your roadmap matters to the people who are not interested in the tech, right? So let's just put up the template. I think it looks like this, right? Upsell story, how many people in the category, what do we get if they upsell, and what's our wild guess for how many are gonna go? Churn story, roughly how many are we losing every year, what are they worth, and our guess for what we would improve if we did the thing, right? Volume, how much more could we sell or collect if we fill in your tech story, what do we make on each unit, and what's our guess for how much improvement? Notice these are all the same, they're all simple. They're designed for executives who have ADHD and aren't gonna pay attention unless they're simple, right? We good? All right, so let's take 7 minutes, and then we're gonna pass microphones around and ask for a few volunteers. We're gonna get a special gift from me for telling us their money story. Go.